I caught my 4-year-old son selling condoms to a stranger, but the stranger turned out to be his own father, whose family has a dark secret that will ruin us.
So, you're pregnant with my son's child. How lovely. Guess what? I'm going to kill this baby. And I will kill you if you don't go away from my son's life right now.
But why would you?
Because you're a nobody. My son is a brain surgeon and from a respectable family. He should be ashamed of knocking up a slut like you.
Catherine, Zoe's future mother-in-law, and the grandmother of her unborn baby, pulled out a knife and looked menacingly at Zoe.
Zoe Fuller, there's only one ending for this baby. Death. This child will die in your womb. I will never let him live.
With that, Catherine pulled out a knife and stabbed Zoe in the stomach. Zoe's heart-wrenching scream tore through the night sky. Catherine smiled as she turned her back on Zoe's bloody body and walked away. Zoe's vision faded, and her world went black. 4 years later, somewhere in the city of Phoenix, Zoe finishes work and leaves her office early to meet her son, Max, at the hospital. Max has leukemia and is undergoing chemotherapy there.
Hey there, my little love.
Mommy!
Zoe hugs Max and looks gratefully at the nurse.
Luna, thank you for taking such good care of Max. Are you the only one on duty today? Where are the other nurses?
Nurse Luna pointed down the hall to a group of nurses peeping around the corner.
They are all gawking at the new brain surgeon who just joined. He is just gorgeous.
Zoe's heart suddenly pounded louder as she heard the words, brain surgeon.
I mean, even his voice is sexy. He's one of Phoenix's most eligible bachelors. I heard his family is so loaded. I don't think we'd stand a chance with him. I'm sure he only dates women from the right kind of family.
Zoe was suddenly filled with an overwhelming fear that she had felt 4 years earlier.
Could it be him?
Zoe stifled a yawn as she finished her meeting and walked out of her boss, Talon Taylor's office. She hadn't slept well last night. Nurse Luna's words yesterday about being a part of the right kind of family had dredged up memories that Zoe preferred to keep buried, and she had tossed and turned all night. When Courtney saw Zoe approaching, she leapt up and handed Zoe's phone to her.
Oh, good. There you are. Zoe, your phone has rung more than 10 times in a row. Someone needs to talk to you.
Is it the hospital calling?
Zoe asked her anxiously, dropping her drawings on the desk and quickly taking the phone from Courtney.
No, don't worry. I checked. If it had been the hospital, I would have come and gotten you.
Zoe unlocked her phone. She let out a long sigh of relief. It was just Linda. She was her younger sister Ziva's best friend. She quickly called Linda back. Linda picked up on the first ring.
Oh, Zoe, thank God you called back.
Linda, what's going on? Is something wrong? Did something happen?
It's Ziva. She fell down the stairs and almost killed herself.
Linda's words exploded in Zoe's mind like a bomb.
But don't worry, Zoe. Ziva will be fine.
Linda added, trying to reassure her. Linda's 2 sentences made Zoe feel like she was on a roller coaster. Zoe patted her chest to try to settle her rapidly beating heart. She nervously asked Linda,
How badly is Eva hurt?
We already took her to the hospital. The doctor said her injuries weren't a big problem, but Ziva's broken her leg and had a slight concussion.
What? And this is not a big problem? Which doctor said that?
Ziva's attending doctor said that.
Forget it. Which hospital are you guys at? I'll come over right away.
Zoe said, already starting to pack up her things.
St. Mary's.
Okay, I'm on my way.
Zoe hung up and quickly filled Courtney in on what had happened and asked her to tell the boss why she'd left early. Once Zoe was in her car, she called Linda back on the speaker. Something didn't feel right.
Okay, Linda, tell me what's really going on.
Going on? What do you mean, Zoe?
Tell me the truth, Linda, the full truth. What did you mean when you said earlier that Ziva killed herself?
The younger woman sighed.
Okay, it's like this. Ziva didn't fall down the stairs. She deliberately threw herself down the stairs. She wanted to injure herself, but she didn't want to die.
Linda explained.
Is my sister insane?
Zoe angrily shouted.
She fell in love with a brain surgeon that works at St. Mary's Hospital, but he always ignores her. Ziva wanted to get admitted to the hospital, so he would have to pay attention to her.
Linda explained.
Brain surgeon? Was this the same handsome brain surgeon that the nurses had been talking about last night?
Zoe, I told her I thought she was crazy, but you know how Ziva is. She wouldn't listen.
Linda added.
What was she thinking?
Zoe shouted, trembling with anger.
She could have died. Ziva doesn't need a brain surgeon, she needs a shrink. She's nuts.
The moment Zoe entered Ziva's hospital room, she angrily threw her purse onto the bedside table and glared at her sister, her arms folded across her chest. Ziva's leg was in a cast, and there was a large bandage on her forehead.
Ziva, you have some serious explaining to do.
Hi, sis. It really hurts.
Ziva's eyes were red as she looked at the furious Zoe. She was trying to look pitiful to gain sympathy, but Zoe wasn't having it.
Good. You deserve it for doing something so stupid. And that too, over a man?
She looked at her sister's battered body. Her heart hurt, but Zoe's mouth scolded.
To risk your life over some guy, it's absurd.
As she spoke, Zoe grabbed the water pitcher off the table.
You're out of water. I'll go and get you some more.
Zoe walked out of Ziva's room. She didn't care about the water pitcher. Zoe was just so angry she needed a moment alone to calm down. She turned right and walked down the hall to the nurse's station to ask for more water. While she waited for the nurse to fill the water pitcher, Zoe took some deep breaths to soothe herself. Seeing the visitor's coffee station nearby, Zoe walked over to fix herself a cup. She was going to need caffeine to deal with her sister. Stirring in the sugar, Zoe glanced up and froze. She was staring at a man's back. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair. He wore a white doctor's coat, and his hands were casually in his pockets. Zoe stood frozen as she watched the man round the corner and disappear from view. No, it couldn't have been him, Zoe thought. Why would he be here in Phoenix? He lived in Scottsdale. Zoe shook her head. No, this was just her mind playing tricks on her, because Zoe had been thinking about Blaine after what Luna had said last night. She needed to get a hold of herself. Zoe finished making her coffee and, after thanking the nurse for the water, walked back to her sister's room. Entering the room, Zoe set the water pitcher down on the counter, her back to the bed.
Any dizziness or nausea?
A deep male voice asked. Zoe's heart stopped. It was him. She would know that voice anywhere. Her chest tightened, and she forgot to breathe as she turned around.
My stomach is better.
Ziva smiled as she answered the doctor's question. She glanced over at Zoe by the door.
Sis, why are you just standing there? Come on in.
Blaine was busy checking Ziva and didn't turn around. He bent over and aimed a small light into Ziva's eyes.
Any double vision?
Maybe, a little.
Seeing the dazed Zoe still staring at Blaine's back, Ziva jokingly called out again.
Sis, what are you doing? What are you staring at?
Blaine still did not look back. Gathering herself, Zoe finally spoke.
Ziva, are you thirsty? I got more water.
Blaine stiffened when he heard Zoe's voice. He seemed stunned for a second. He turned around and locked eyes with Zoe. His dark eyes made shivers run down Zoe's back. Blaine's eyes looked black, but she knew they shifted with his mood from various shades of gray to almost black. Her heart was beating wildly. She had thought that she would never be looking into Blaine's eyes again. Zoe was sure her face reflected her emotional upheaval. Blaine seemed remarkably calm by comparison. Blaine's eyes showed his shock only for a moment before returning to normal. It was as if Zoe's sudden appearance hadn't affected him. It had been 4 years. Perhaps he saw her as barely more than a distant memory, now a stranger from his past.
You're Ziva's sister.
That voice. Zoe had always loved Blaine's voice. He could have been a radio host if he hadn't been a surgeon. His voice was deep, rich, and oh so seductive.
Yes, I am her older sister.
Zoe answered, trying to hide the nervousness from her voice. Blaine turned back around to continue examining Ziva.
Your sister may need to stay in the hospital for observation for a few more days.
Okay, thank you.
Zoe politely replied. She tried to sound as cool and calm as Blaine, but Zoe feared she was failing miserably. She walked over to set her coffee down on the side table. Ziva watched her sister curiously.
Zoe, this is Dr. Blaine Dexter, my attending physician.
Zoe didn't realize how much her hand had been shaking from nervousness until she tried to set her coffee down and hot liquid spilled all over the back of her hand. She silently screamed inside as a burning pain shot through her hand. Zoe quickly hid her hand behind her back as she turned around, but then suddenly she felt a cool touch. It was Blaine, and he was holding Zoe's hand. Zoe's hand was burning up, but it wasn't just the burn on her hand causing Zoe's discomfort, but Blaine's strong fingers wrapped around hers. His touch was cool, but Zoe felt hot and flushed all over. Her entire body had tensed at Blaine's touch. Zoe wanted to break free, but found herself unable to resist his closeness.
The burn doesn't look that serious. You'll likely have blistering, but the burn should heal without scarring. The cream will help with the discomfort.
Blaine told her. His voice was cold and clinical. Unlike Zoe, he seemed unaffected by her touch. This was probably just a doctor's instinctive reaction to her injury, because Zoe saw no concern or worry in his eyes, only indifference.
Kelly, take Miss Fuller's sister and put some burn cream on her wound.
Blaine released Zoe's hand and turned to instruct the young nurse who had entered the room a moment ago. After he finished speaking, he turned around and walked toward Ziva. He took out the CT scan of her brain from a large white sleeve. Blaine walked to the window and held up the image, studying it closely.
Right this way, miss.
No, really, I'm fine. It's just a little burn. I'll put cream on it when I get home.
It is not just a little problem.
Blaine said. He finished looking at Ziva's CT scan and returned it to its white sleeve as he walked back toward them.
You need to be careful. It's a minor burn now, but if left untreated, it could become infected, causing fever and other complications which some cream won't be able to solve.
Zoe pursed her lips and looked at him. He was being paranoid, but she remained polite.
Then perhaps Dr. Dexter would be kind enough to write me a prescription.
Zoe admitted. She got up and started to pack Ziva's things before adding,
This is for your good. You need to forget about him, Ziva.
What do you mean this is for my good?
Ziva became anxious and shouted at Zoe.
Who do you think you are? What right do you have to interfere with my love life? What? Do you want him for yourself now? I saw you staring at him.
Ziva's voice was filled with tearful anger as she reprimanded her older sister. Zoe, who was folding Ziva's clothes, suddenly froze. Every question Ziva asked was like a sharp blade stabbing Zoe in the heart.
Admit it, Zoe. You like him and you want him for yourself. If you do, just say it. You don't need to stab me in the back.
Zoe turned around. There was a bone-chilling coldness in her eyes. She looked at her sister.
Ziva, in your heart, do you really think I am such a terrible person? That I would betray you?
She stared at Ziva, her heart aching. Her sister didn't know it, but Zoe simply didn't want to hear her younger sister get hurt. She didn't want her sister to fall in love with a man she could never have. To find the kind of deep love that only happens when you meet your soulmate, to only have him taken away. Zoe didn't want her sister threatened, frightened, and harassed by others day and night. This kind of torture wasn't something Zoe would wish on her worst enemy, let alone her sister. No one should have to experience the kind of pain Zoe had. But Zoe didn't say any of this. Ziva didn't know about her and Blaine, and she couldn't. Zoe threw down the clothes in her hands and headed for the door.
I'm going to see Max.
Zoe walked blindly, her mind reeling. Realizing she was heading in the opposite direction of her son's room, Zoe stopped and leaned against the corridor wall. She kept taking deep breaths. Zoe tried hard to adjust her emotions, but the dull discomfort in her chest made her eyes redden as she fought back tears. She had not expected to ever be fighting over Blaine with her sister. She didn't dare tell her sister about her relationship with Blaine. Zoe was hurt and embarrassed, but most of all, devastated. Blaine had a girlfriend. Zoe didn't know why this had come as such a shock to her. It had been 4 years. Blaine was extremely handsome and successful. He had moved on. Why wouldn't he? She should think of this as a good thing. This meant they both had new lives. She should be happy for him. However, no matter how hard Zoe tried, she couldn't help but feel anything but miserable. It felt like she'd lost him all over again. Although she knew this was foolish thinking, Zoe had lost him 4 years ago, and there was no going back. Blaine had made this crystal clear just moments ago when he repeated his words.
I could never be with the woman who betrayed my trust.
Zoe wiped her eyes and straightened. She began to walk towards Max's room. Ziva would be transferred later today to orthopedics. Seeing Blaine today was just a fluke of fate. Sure, Zoe went to and from St. Mary's Hospital daily, but Max was in the oncology unit. He didn't need a brain surgeon. Max's room was in a different wing, 3 stories up. Zoe picked up her pace, cheered by the thought of seeing her son. Yep, after today, Zoe would never have to see Blaine again. Zoe was relieved when Ziva was released from the hospital 3 days after being moved to the orthopedics unit. Every time Zoe had stepped out of the elevator to visit Ziva, she'd feared running into Blaine again. While he definitely wouldn't be visiting her sister, orthopedics was only 1 floor below neurology, so the chances of running into Blaine were higher in this wing. Now that Ziva had been discharged, Zoe was in the clear. Zoe knocked on the open door of her boss's office.
Hey, Talon, I heard you wanted to see me.
Seeing Zoe standing in the open doorway, Talon smiled and waved her in.
Yes, come on in. Sit down. I wanted to talk to you about a new client.
Talon was not only the chief designer, but also the owner of Taylor Interiors. Tall with curly, close-cropped hair, dark-rimmed glasses, and dressed in one of his favorite tweed jackets, he looked like a cross between a college professor and a hipster. As she took a seat across from him, Talon handed Zoe a file.
A new client came in I think is a great fit for your design aesthetic. He lives in the new skyscraper downtown. The contact that referred him to us indicated money is no object, so he sounds like my perfect kind of client. Hopefully, if this goes well, he'll refer us to all his rich friends.
Sounds great. I can't wait to get started.
Excellent. The client wants to meet for dinner tonight to discuss his project at 6 p.m. at the Waterford International Hotel. His contact details are in the file. I know you typically visit your son right after work, so feel free to leave early if you want to see Max first.
Talon was not only a good boss, but a nice guy.
That's very thoughtful of you, Talon. Thank you. I'll do that.
As she was headed to the door, Talon called her back.
Hey, Zoe, one more thing. A quick warning. My friend indicated this client could be a bit picky, but with your style and attentiveness, I'm sure you'll be fine.
No worries. I've got this. I won't let you down.
After squeezing in a visit with Max, Zoe headed to the Waterford Hotel to meet her new client. Traffic was heavy since it was rush hour, so she arrived at the hotel with only a few minutes to spare. Walking into the lobby, Zoe was reaching into her bag to pull out the file and call her client when she suddenly stopped dead in her tracks. Zoe blinked in disbelief at the man casually sitting by the wall of windows. He was gazing outside the city, the color of his eyes today a stormy gray. He'd swapped his doctor's coat for a pinstriped suit, which, given the way it perfectly accentuated his broad shoulders and muscular build, had obviously been custom made for him. He seemed to be waiting for someone. His long fingers drummed rhythmically on the table beside him to show that his patience was waning. This couldn't be happening. Zoe had managed to avoid him all week at the hospital, only for Blaine to now be sitting in the same hotel as her client meeting. Realizing he hadn't seen her yet, Zoe frantically looked around for a place to hide. Spotting a love seat that faced away from the windows, she quickly headed towards it. Just before sitting down, Zoe chanced to glance back in Blaine's direction, only to find him now looking right at her. Their eyes met, and Zoe's panic was written all over her face. She didn't have the time to cover it up. Zoe hurriedly sat down on the love seat facing away from Blaine. She sucked in a deep breath and tried to calm her nerves. Needing to do something with her hands, Zoe took the client's file out of her bag and was about to call him when her phone vibrated with an incoming call. Thinking it was her client calling, she quickly grabbed her phone. When Zoe saw the number on her caller ID, she was stunned. The caller wasn't in her contacts, but the phone's number that appeared on the screen was one etched in Zoe's memory. It was Blaine. He was still using his Scottsdale number, unlike Zoe, who had changed her phone number as soon as she moved to Phoenix. So how did Blaine have her number now? Zoe turned around and looked at him. Blaine was looking at her indifferently, his phone by his ear, waiting for Zoe to pick up. She hesitated for a moment before finally pressing the answer button.
Are we going to discuss my project by shouting at each other across the room, or are you going to join me?
What?
Well, if I had wanted to talk over the phone, I wouldn't have asked you to meet me here.
No, Zoe thought. It couldn't be him. She hurriedly opened her new client's file, seeing the name on the paperwork. Zoe's stomach sank. Why? Oh, why had she not flipped through the client's information earlier?
Miss Fuller, do you always show up to client meetings this unprepared? If so, I can't say this is an auspicious start to this project.
I'm so sorry. I'll be right there.
Zoe hung up the phone and quickly grabbed her things and walked to where Blaine sat waiting.
I'm sorry, I didn't know it was you.
Blaine remained seated, watching Zoe with his dark eyes, but saying nothing. Growing increasingly uncomfortable with Blaine's silence and scrutiny, Zoe forced herself to smile and focus on work. She got straight to the point and asked,
Dr. Dexter, do you have any specific ideas for your home's design? Starting with a blank slate can be so exciting. Do you prefer a modern or a more classical look? There are so many styles to choose, from mid-century, retro, and revival, to name a few. Just not shabby chic. Shabby chic is out, and coastal grandma is in. Not that you want your home to look like a grandmother's house, since you're a man, not a grandma.
Zoe saw Blaine raise his eyebrows at her. She knew she had started to babble out of nervousness, but Zoe couldn't seem to stop herself.
What about furniture? Antiques or more modular pieces? Some people prioritize style, others comfort. Did you have a specific color scheme in mind? Color plays a huge role in any design, setting the mood for the whole interior. You can go monochrome for a clean, uncluttered look, or more eclectic. Think black and white with pops of bright colors like red or yellow. Warm colors can create a welcoming and cozy environment, where blues and grays can be soothing. Here.
Zoe shoved her portfolio into Blaine's hands.
These are recent examples of my work. If you see anything that catches your eye, let me know. I can do any type of design you might want.
Zoe finally stopped talking. She was out of breath and wished there was a hole in the hotel lobby she could crawl into. Blaine didn't open Zoe's portfolio. She figured he was probably thinking of how quickly he could get Talon on the phone to have her fired. Finally, he spoke.
Right now, what I want is food. I'm hungry. Let's eat first.
Blaine stood up and started walking towards the hotel restaurant. Zoe stood there in surprise for a moment before she quickly grabbed her portfolio and hurried after him. At least while Zoe was eating, she wouldn't be able to talk. Zoe was so embarrassed she'd been caught off guard when she discovered Blaine was her new client and had started babbling nervously. Zoe had thought for certain he'd demand another designer be assigned to his project, but instead, Blaine had insisted they eat before discussing his design. After the restaurant's host seated them at their table, Zoe tried to offer Blaine another apology.
I'm sorry about earlier. I was rude. I'm not usually that, talkative.
It was true. Zoe normally prided herself on her professionalism. Usually, when Zoe met with a new client, she would make small talk and get to know her client before launching into a discussion of their project. Zoe just hadn't been able to do this with Blaine. She just wanted to get to the main topic and end the meeting as soon as possible. Blaine was reading the menu and didn't look at Zoe as he answered.
Never mind. This was unexpected, to say the least.
The waiter approached and asked Zoe what she would like to order. She shook her head at him with a polite smile.
Just sparkling water for me, please.
Not only did this restaurant look extremely expensive, but Zoe also didn't think she could eat with her stomach in knots. Blaine frowned at Zoe's response and then proceeded to order a wide variety of dishes.
Please bring 2 plates. She will be sharing with me.
Blaine told the waiter as he closed the menu and handed it back.
Really, Dr. Dexter, I'm fine. You didn't need to order all that food.
Blaine ignored her objection, not wanting to annoy him further. Zoe obediently shut her mouth. The server returned quickly with their food, and smelling the delicious aromas, Zoe couldn't help it when her stomach growled loudly. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, and rarely went out as every dollar she made went towards Max's treatments. Zoe blushed. Blaine glanced at her face, but didn't comment. Instead, he put generous helpings of the various items on Zoe's plate. Zoe picked up her fork and took several bites, but when she looked up again, she saw Blaine wasn't eating. She couldn't help but ask.
I thought you were hungry. Why aren't you eating?
I don't want to eat right now. Don't worry about me.
Blaine calmly replied, then looked out the window and no longer spoke. Zoe's intuition told her Blaine wasn't in a good mood. His gray eyes were stormy and distant. He clearly had something on his mind.
Is everything all right?
Blaine turned and looked at her.
I'm not trying to pry. I can just tell something is bothering you.
Blaine didn't reply. He didn't want to tell Zoe that 2 hours ago he saw a life disappear before his eyes. He'd done everything he could, but all of Blaine's skills weren't enough to save his patient, and she died on the operating table. He had thought that as a doctor, he would eventually get used to seeing a life lost, but Blaine now knew that death was something you never got used to. There was an indescribable heaviness in his heart, and it made his breathing a little ragged. Seeing that Blaine didn't want to talk about it, Zoe didn't say anything else. She just quietly looked down and resumed eating. She shouldn't be concerned about Blaine, but she couldn't help herself. Her mind was in chaos because of him. Blaine's gaze fell on Zoe's lowered face. Since she was looking down, he couldn't see her blue eyes clearly, but he could see her long lashes flittering against her cheeks. She was nervous. He watched as Zoe tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. She'd worn it up today, but some long strands had escaped falling gently around her face. It didn't seem possible, but Zoe was even more beautiful than he remembered. He closed his eyes for a moment, and Blaine's heavy heart seemed to calm. Due to Zoe's few words of gentle concern, he gradually felt a sense of relief. When Zoe finished eating, there was still a huge amount of food left. Blaine hadn't eaten anything. Instead, he just sat across from her and watched her eat. Zoe wiped her mouth with her napkin, thinking it was time to discuss his project. Zoe opened her mouth to speak, only for Blaine's phone to vibrate on the table with an incoming call. It was the hospital calling. Picking up, Blaine heard David Lawson's voice. He was another surgeon in Blaine's unit.
Hey Blaine, it's David. One of your patients has developed complications and may need emergency surgery.
Which patient?
The woman in room 304.
Blaine sighed. He'd been afraid of this happening.
Okay, I know who you're talking about. Have her prepped for surgery. I'm on my way.
Blaine quickly hung up the phone. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a bunch of bills, dropping them on the table.
Is there something urgent at the hospital?
Zoe assumed that their design conversation was over before it had even started.
Yes, I have a patient that needs emergency surgery.
Blaine put away his phone and stood up. He looked down at Zoe.
About the renovation of my place, I will contact you when I have more time to talk.
Okay.
Zoe nodded. She completely understood his busy schedule. Blaine nodded and left the table, heading straight for the exit. Zoe only looked away when Blaine's straight and broad back disappeared. Watching him leave, she felt a sense of loss. 15 minutes later, Blaine arrived at the hospital. He went into the locker room and changed into a blue sterile surgical gown before heading to the surgical sinks to scrub up. David, who was going to assist Blaine with the operation, also changed into a sterile gown and joined him at the sinks.
Blaine, don't stress too much about what happened earlier. Doctors aren't gods. You did your best to save that patient, and that's all you can do.
Blaine picked up the brush next to him and started to scrub his arm.
Don't worry. I won't let what happened earlier today affect this operation. By the way, the patient's family didn't cause any trouble, did they?
No, maybe they had already mentally prepared themselves for the worst.
Yeah.
David looked at him and smiled.
You look much better than when you left the hospital. Did something good happen while you were gone?
No, I'm just feeling a little better than I was this afternoon.
Blaine looked at himself in the mirror and tried to ignore the slight ripple in his heart. The water stopped, and the disinfection was complete. Blaine raised his arms and walked towards the operating room.
I'm heading in. See you in a minute.
Then Blaine walked into the room, his only thoughts now of his patient. Zoe arrived home from the hotel and walked into the living room, where her mother and Ziva were watching TV. Greeting them, Zoe said,
Mom, I got a new part-time job. I only came home to change and then I'm heading out again. Don't wait up for me. I'm not coming back tonight. I'm going to the hospital to see Max after I get off work.
Zoe, you work too hard.
Her mother, Gloria, told her, sighing.
You are a good girl. Why do you torture yourself like this?
Mom, I'm fine, really. You raised a strong daughter.
Zoe comforted her mother.
Strong? Look at yourself, Zoe. You've grown so skinny over the past year and you're just skin and bones. You don't know how to treat yourself properly. And you're worrying our mother. You have to promise Mom to go on a blind date.
Gloria turned to Zoe, hopefully.
Our neighbor Mrs. Benando's nephew is available. He's 38, divorced, and a single father. He has a young daughter. Mrs. Benando says he does very well in his job in sales. He sounds like a good prospect who is worth meeting. Shall I arrange a blind date for you two?
Zoe's heart hurt when she heard her mother's earnest words. She had no interest in dating, but she didn't like hearing her mother was worried about her.
Mom, it's not that I don't want to go on a date. It's just that Max's current physical condition complicates things. I can't bring someone new into our lives right now. It wouldn't be fair to them. And I would never want to be a burden to someone else. It just wouldn't feel right.
Zoe, Mom and I advise you to give up your baby. You refuse to listen to us. Now he is sick and you have this burden to carry. What if all the stress caused...
Before Ziva could finish, Gloria cut her off.
Ziva, stop it. You're talking nonsense. If Max ever heard you say such things, how sad he would be.
Ziva had enough decency to know she'd gone too far.
Zoe, you know I love Max. I didn't mean that...
Ziva was afraid that her sister would be sad, so she quickly backtracked.
I don't mean to blame you for Max's illness. I just feel sorry for you. Seeing you work so hard makes me sad because I'm your sister.
I know that both you and Mom are worried about me, alright? I promise you that once Max's leukemia is cured, I will immediately go on as many dates as you can find me, okay? I'll schedule breakfast, lunch, and dinner dates if it makes you both happy. Right now, though, I need to get ready for my new part-time job.
Zoe smiled at them before she hurried off to change her clothes. After Zoe went into her bedroom and closed the door, Gloria and Ziva looked at each other. Neither wanted to say aloud what both were thinking. Zoe was putting her life on hold until her son was cured. But what if that day never came? What would happen to Zoe then? Blaine sat on a park bench outside the west wing of St. Mary's Hospital, enjoying the afternoon sunshine. His long legs were stretched out in front of him, and he closed his eyes to rest. Yesterday had been a long day with multiple surgeries and the death of his patient. Exhausted, Blaine had escaped outside between operations for some fresh air and had dozed off under the warm autumn sun. Suddenly, Blaine felt something hit his foot. He opened his eyes in a daze.
I'm sorry.
A soft voice said by Blaine's feet. Blaine looked down and saw a little boy holding a football. He blinked up at Blaine with his big, innocent eyes. The little boy was around 4 years old. Even though he was bald, it didn't affect his cuteness. He was a very handsome little guy. His eyes were unusually dark blue, and they shone brightly with curiosity and intelligence. This kid was going to be a heartbreaker.
I'm sorry my ball hit your foot.
The little boy repeated apologetically. Blaine couldn't help but smile as he said,
It's okay. No worries.
Are you a doctor?
The little boy asked curiously. He looked up at Blaine's white coat and the stethoscope around his neck.
Yes.
You're very handsome. You're even more handsome than me. If Luna met you, she might not want to marry me anymore.
As the little boy spoke, he tried to climb onto the bench Blaine was sitting on. Because he was too short and the bench was too tall, he was expending a lot of effort but couldn't climb up. Seeing his funny face all scrunched up in frustration, Blaine couldn't help but laugh. He reached out and helped the little boy. He settled onto the bench beside Blaine, and they sat side by side.
Thank you, doctor.
The little boy smiled happily. He swung his little legs back and forth.
What's your name?
Blaine asked, bumping his shoulder gently.
My name is Max. Doctor, what's your name?
The little boy asked in his childish voice, blinking his big eyes as he looked at Blaine.
My name is Blaine Dexter.
Dr. Dexter?
The little guy opened his eyes wide and looked at the tall and handsome doctor in front of him in surprise. Max studied Blaine, looking him over from top to bottom.
Dr. Dexter, are you a brain surgeon?
Blaine raised his eyebrows in surprise.
Yes, I am a doctor in the neurology department.
Blaine stretched his arm along the back of the bench and turned to look at the little boy next to him curiously.
Are you a new professor at the hospital?
Yes?
Do you live in a penthouse downtown?
Yes.
Is your family loaded with strong political influence?
Hey, kid, are you a detective?
Do the nurses want to have babies when they hear your voice?
Blaine didn't know whether to laugh or cry.
You can't say that, Max.
Dr. Dexter, are you still single?
Max asked, remembering the nurse's conversation. Blaine shook his head.
I have a girlfriend.
But you're supposed to be Phoenix's most eligible bachelor.
The little boy looked at him regretfully. Blaine thought he was funny. He couldn't help but tease Max.
I have a girlfriend. Why are you acting like it's a bad thing?
Max lowered his head and played with the football in his lap, obviously disappointed.
I hoped you didn't have a girlfriend, so I could introduce my mommy to you, and she could be your girlfriend.
Blaine was stunned.
Max, you don't have a daddy?
I have a daddy, but my daddy and mommy don't live together.
I see.
Blaine felt bad for the kid.
Dr. Dexter, my mommy works hard, and she still takes good care of me. She comes to see me every day.
Max told him.
She's beautiful and kind. She loves me very much, and she is super strong. She's so good, but every time my grandma introduces a date to mommy, she doesn't want to go because I'm sick, and she wants to stay with me. Dr. Dexter, do you think I could find a boyfriend as good as you for my mommy? Then she wouldn't have to work so hard.
Listening to the little guy's words, Blaine felt an inexplicable ache around his heart.
Dr. Dexter, can I recover from my illness?
The little boy suddenly asked him. Max's voice sounded a little lonely.
Of course.
Blaine had no idea what disease Max was suffering from, but he knew that he must be very ill. Given his bald head, Max probably had a form of cancer and was undergoing chemotherapy. The little guy sighed.
If I fall asleep one day and never wake up again, then my mommy will cry and be so sad. My friend Maria fell asleep and didn't wake up, and her mommy couldn't stop crying. I don't want to see my mommy cry too, so I hope that I get better soon.
Blaine's throat felt a little dry and hoarse. Facing this small patient beside him, he couldn't say anything to comfort him, because he didn't know what to say. The two sat beside each other thinking, neither saying anything to the other for a while, but enjoying each other's company nonetheless.
Okay, right.
The little guy seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He put his little hand in his pocket and fished around for something before pulling out a small object. Holding it up for Blaine's inspection, Max asked,
Dr. Dexter, do you think you can use this thing?
Blaine was speechless. It was a condom. It was brightly wrapped and seemed to be some sort of a giveaway sample for a new brand Blaine had never heard of. Seeing Blaine's strange expression, the little guy looked confused and a little embarrassed. Max scratched his bald head and his face turned red before admitting,
Mommy said that it would be very bad to take out this thing and show it to anyone. But Mommy sells things to help cure me, so I thought I could sell these things too. Mommy says honest work is always good, and she's not embarrassed if it helps cure Max. So, Dr. Dexter, can you use this thing? If you need it, you can buy it from me, and I have more too.
The little guy blinked his innocent eyes and hopefully stared at Blaine. Blaine was both charmed and horrified. He had never met a child like Max before. The little guy still held the condom in his hand and waved it in front of Blaine's face. Max grew serious, and he lowered his voice a bit when he asked,
Do you know what this thing is used for, Dr. Dexter? I asked Mommy, but she wouldn't tell me.
Blaine was curious about what kind of a mother could raise such an innocent yet mischievous child like Max.
Your mother is right not to tell you.
Blaine told him with a smile.
But my mama said that even men need to use it. Mommy said Max is still a little boy. I don't need this thing yet, she told me. But one day, I'll be a big guy, and then I should use it too.
Max smiled and looked satisfied, obviously eagerly awaiting the day he found out what the mystery object did. Blaine didn't know what to say. He finally understood what kind of mother could teach such a son. A very strong and patient one. Blaine was growing more and more interested in this mother. Blaine reached into his pocket for his wallet.
All right, I'll buy all the things you have.
Really?
The little boy's eyes lit up with excitement. Max's little hands eagerly dug around in his pockets as he pulled out condom after condom.
I took these from my mommy's bag so that I could help her make money.
Max pulled a total of 18 condoms out of his pocket. Blaine didn't want to think about what Max's poor mother would say if she knew he was outside selling these things. Max carefully counted.
Dr. Dexter, I have 18 things to sell. Each of them costs 50 cents. How much is it in total?
Max started to count on his fingers, but gave Blaine a confused look.
That's $9 total.
Blaine told him. He took out a $20 bill and handed it to Max.
Here you go. I don't have anything smaller, so you can keep the rest too.
Max grinned and jumped off the bench. He stood in front of Blaine and stuck his hand out so that they could shake on their deal.
Thank you, Dr. Dexter. When you need more of these things, you come to find me.
He said as they shook hands, and Blaine choked back a laugh.
Max! Max, where are you?
Suddenly, someone was calling Max's name.
Nurse Luna!
Max turned around and grinned.
Nurse Luna, I'm over here.
Blaine quietly tucked the 18 condoms into his pocket. The nurse ran towards Max.
Didn't you promise to wait for me by the fountain?
I'm sorry, I kicked the football, and it kept rolling, so I had to chase it far. Nurse Luna, I want to introduce you to my new friend.
Max pointed to Blaine on the bench.
This is Dr. Dexter, whose voice can make nurses have babies.
Blaine had the sudden urge to stitch the little monster's mouth shut. Luna started when she heard what Max said. She was initially stunned when she saw Blaine on the bench. In the next moment, her face turned red from embarrassment.
Hello, Dr. Dexter.
Hello.
Blaine replied politely, unlike a moment ago when Blaine had let his guard down while talking to Max. Now there was not much expression on his handsome face. Max dropped his football at that moment, and it started rolling away. As Max ran after it, Blaine asked Luna quietly,
Can you tell me what's wrong with the little guy?
Luna's eyes clouded as she quietly answered him.
Leukemia, I'm afraid.
Blaine frowned. This little guy had such a disease.
Have you found a match for a bone marrow transplant?
Blaine asked with concern, fearing the nurse's answer. Luna shook her head sadly as she looked over at Max chasing his ball.
The family has all been tested, and no one is a match. I've been searching for a donor all over the city for over a year without success.
Blaine felt the same ache around his heart as earlier at Luna's answer. He knew how difficult it was to find a bone marrow donor. A patient's best chance of finding a match was usually a family member. But if all of Max's family had already been tested without success, it would take a miracle to find a matching donor now. Sighing, Blaine stood up.
I still have one more surgery. I should get back inside. Okay, you go ahead and do your thing.
Luna's face was still red.
Goodbye, Dr. Dexter.
Max waved, looking a bit glum. He didn't want to say goodbye to Blaine yet.
Goodbye, buddy. I'll see you around.
Blaine said, and with an affectionate pat on Max's head, he walked away. Luna sighed as she watched Blaine leave.
He's so handsome.
Yes, and loaded.
Max nodded in agreement, thinking about how he'd sold all of his things to Dr. Dexter. Luna looked at Max beside her, and then at the back of the man who had just left.
You know, I never noticed before, but seeing you two together, you and Dr. Dexter kind of look alike.
Yes, because we're both so handsome.
Blaine was in the locker room changing his clothes in preparation for surgery. As he took off his white coat, Max's 18 condoms spilled out all over the floor.
Dude!
David exclaimed and started laughing.
Blaine, what have you got planned for after work? And can I join you?
Blaine bent down to pick up the condoms.
If I were to tell you that these were sold to me by a 4-year-old pint-sized hustler, would you believe me?
What? No way! You're lying!
David laughed so hard he couldn't talk for a moment. Hearing his phone ringing, Blaine ignored David's laughter and picked it up. Zoe was calling, which surprised him.
Hello.
Don't let your excitement die! The full audio series is on the Pocket FM app. Tap the link in the description to install now.